Chosen one, the fact that this is reaching you right now, on this exact night, is not chance. You were led here by a hand higher than coincidence, because you just did something you were never supposed to be able to do, and you need to understand it before it slips away. What you did was not part of the original plan. You did not follow the script that fear and other people and an old version of you had written. You broke it, and where the plan ended, you did not stop. You wrote a new one, with your own hand. And somewhere above, watching, there was not disappointment that you went off the page. There was astonishment. You actually did it. But here is what no one is telling you tonight, and it is the reason you were guided to these words. What you did was not luck, and it was not some new personality you suddenly became. It was a state you entered, a real, physical state, a moment when the two halves of you that are almost always at odds fell into sync, and for the first time, you operated as your whole self. That is what let you become the author instead of the follower. And the danger, the reason this matters so much right now, is that unless you understand it, those two halves drift apart again, the old programming reclaims the pen, and you snap back to the script as if the whole thing never happened. So, let me be clear about what this is and what it is not. This is not a message telling you to be proud of yourself and move on. This is the opposite. This is the warning and the key together. You touch something powerful, and powerful things fade when they are not understood. Tonight I am going to make sure you understand it, so the most important moment of your life so far does not become a memory, but a doorway you can walk through again and again. Here is what I am going to walk you through, and you have to stay to the end, because the part that makes it permanent comes late. First, I am going to show you what actually happened inside you the moment you went off the plan. Then I am going to show you why the old script will fight hardest to reclaim you in the hours right after, so you do not mistake that pull for the truth. After that, I am going to show you who you become when you stay the author. And, near the end, I am going to place in your hands the one thing that lets you enter that state again, on command. None of this works if you stay a spectator to your own breakthrough. So before we go deeper, I want you to plant a flag. If you know exactly the moment I am talking about, the thing you did that was not on the page, go to the comments and type 3 words. I did it. Not as a boast, as a refusal to ever hand back the pen. And I already hear the doubt rising, because it rises in everyone who has just crossed this line. You are thinking, what if it was a fluke? What if I cannot do it again? What if the real me is still the one who follows the script? Hold that fear right at the front of your mind, chosen one, because it is not the truth about you. It is the old plan fighting for its life. And by the end of tonight, you will know exactly how to win. So let us begin with what actually happened, because you deserve to understand your own breakthrough, not just celebrate it and lose it. For most of your life, you were running a plan you did not write. It came from 100 places, from people who told you what was realistic, from wounds that taught you to stay small, from an old version of you who decided, long ago, what you were and were not allowed to attempt. You did not experience it as a script. You experienced it as reality, as just the way things are, as simply who you are. But it was a script, and you had been reading your lines from it for years. And then, recently, something happened. In a moment, you may not even be able to fully explain, you stopped reading. You did the thing that was not written anywhere in the plan. Maybe you said the bold thing. Maybe you made the move everyone said you would never make. Maybe you simply refused, for once, to shrink. And in that moment, you were not following anymore. You were authoring. You reached past the edge of the page and wrote a line that had never existed, and the world rearranged itself around it. Now, here is the reframe that changes everything, and I want you to receive it slowly. A part of you has been quietly framing that moment as going off track, as a deviation, as something you got away with that you are not sure you were supposed to do. But that is the old script talking, because the script always calls authorship a mistake. What actually happened was not a derailment. It was a graduation. You crossed the line that separates the people who live inside a plan from the people who write one. And that line, chosen one, is the most important line a human being ever crosses. Think about what it means that heaven was astonished. Astonishment is not doubt. Heaven never doubted your worth. Astonishment is what happens when someone finally does the thing they were capable of all along but had never done. When potential that has been sealed for years suddenly moves in the world. It was not shock that you could. It was joy that you finally did. And that joy from above was real, and it was aimed at you, specifically, in the moment you picked up the pen. Let me say the heart of it as plainly as I can, because this single sentence is the spine of everything tonight. What you did was not you going off plan. It was the moment the two halves of you synced, and you became the author of your own life, instead of the reader of someone else's script. And the only danger now is drifting back out of sync and handing the pen back to the plan. That is the shift. Not, you got lucky. You entered a state, and states can be entered again. And notice the relief already moving in you. If it was a fluke, there would be nothing to do but hope it happens again. But if it was a state, a real alignment inside you, then returning to it is not a matter of luck at all. It is a matter of learning the way back in. Something in you has already begun to sense that, or these words would not be landing the way they are. You are closer to permanent than you think. Let me show you what's switched on, and consider the timing of it, because the timing itself is a message. This did not reach you a year ago, when you were still fully inside the plan and would not have understood a word of it. It reached you now, in the narrow window right after you crossed the line, when it can still make the difference between a breakthrough that sets and a breakthrough that fades. That is not how random things behave. That is how a message behaves when it was sent by someone watching closely, waiting for the exact moment you would need it most, and delivering it precisely then. So, let me name what happened inside you, because naming it is how you keep it. For most of your life, two parts of you have been pulling in different directions. There is the part that dreams, that sees the bigger move, that knows what you are capable of. And there is the part that manages, that follows the rules, that keeps you safe by keeping you inside the lines of the plan. Almost all the time, those two are out of sync. The dreamer proposes and the manager vetoes. The vision rises, and the old programming files it under, not for someone like you. And so you stay on script, year after year, not because you lack the dream, but because the two halves never agree long enough to act. But in the moment you went off the plan, something rare happened. For a few seconds, or a few minutes, the two halves fell into sync. The dreamer and the manager stopped fighting and moved as one. And when that happens, you do not experience yourself as divided anymore. You experience a strange, clear power, a sense that you simply know what to do and do it, without the usual committee of doubt. That is the state that wrote the new plan, not a mood, not adrenaline, a synchronization of the two halves of you that were always meant to work together. I am going to give this a name so you can find your way back to it. We can call it the author state. The author state is what happens when the two halves of your mind lock into the same rhythm and the divided reader becomes a unified writer. In that state, the plan is no longer your master, it is your material. You do not ask the script for permission. You pick up the pen. Everything you have ever done that surprised even you, every bold move, every moment you rose above your own limits, happened in the author state, in a window when the two halves of you were briefly one. And here is what you most need to understand tonight. The author state is not who you occasionally get to be. It is who you actually are. Underneath, whenever the two halves are in sync, the follower, the small one, the reader of the script, That is not the real you. That is you divided. The author is you whole, which means the goal was never to become someone new. It was always to return, on purpose, to the synchronized state where the person you already are can finally act. But there is a reason the author state feels so rare, and I have to be honest about it, because it is exactly what will try to pull you back this week. The two halves of you do not stay in sync on their own. The moment the pressure passes, they drift apart again. The manager reasserts control, and the old programming steps back in to reclaim the pen. That is not failure. That is simply what happens when a synchronization is not anchored. And it is why so many people have one breakthrough and spend years trying to get back to it, never understanding that it was a state they could re-enter, not a lightning strike they had to wait for. To make it permanent, you first have to understand why the old script fights so hard to reclaim you, which is exactly where we go next. Let me make it concrete, because you will trust it more once you catch it in a memory of your own. Think of any time in your life you did something that surprised even you. A moment you spoke up when you always stay silent. A leap you took that the careful you would never have allowed. Afterward you probably said, "I do not know what came over me." But something did come over you, and it was not a stranger. It was your whole self. The two halves briefly synced, the author stepping forward while the manager was, for once, quiet. That feeling of, "I do not know what came over me," is the fingerprint of the author's state. And the fact that you can name it now means you can begin to summon it instead of waiting for it to visit. So let me prepare you for what is coming, because forewarned is protected. In the hours and days right after you enter the author state, something predictable happens. The old script fights to reclaim you. It does not go quietly, because to the old programming, your breakthrough is not a triumph. It is a threat. For years, the plan kept you safe by keeping you small, and now you have proven the walls were never real, and the manager part of you panics. So it sends the oldest weapon it has, doubt. Watch for how it speaks, because it will not sound like an enemy. It will sound reasonable. It will say, "That was a one-time thing." It will say, "Do not get ahead of yourself." It will say, "Who do you think you are, going off plan like that?" and remind you of every past failure as evidence. It may even use exhaustion, a strange heaviness that arrives right after your boldest move, tempting you to rest all the way back into the old life. None of that is the truth. All of it is the script fighting for its life. The intensity of the pullback is not a sign you did something wrong. It is a sign you did something so right that the old programming is afraid. And here is what you must not do. You must not mistake the pullback for a verdict. Most people, right after a breakthrough, feel the doubt come flooding in and conclude that the doubt is the truth and the breakthrough was the illusion. They have it exactly backwards. The breakthrough was the truth. The doubt is the illusion, and it only came because the truth threatened it. If you can hold that line for the crucial hours ahead, the pullback loses its power and the new plan sets. Now let a new picture begin to form, because your future is built from the images you allow yourself to hold. Imagine the version of your life where you no longer lose the author state after every breakthrough. Imagine entering it not by accident, under pressure, once a year, but on purpose, whenever you choose. Imagine facing the next big move and feeling the two halves of you snap into sync on command, the dreamer and the manager working as one, the pen already in your hand. Picture a whole life authored instead of followed. A life where going beyond the plan is not a rare miracle, but simply how you operate. That is not a fantasy. That is what becomes possible once the author state is anchored. Feel what that image does in your body right now. The fear of losing it loosens. The dread of snapping back goes quiet. That loosening is not you imagining things. It is a preview, a small, real taste of what it is to live from the author state as your home base rather than your exception. And if even that small taste can shift how you feel this moment, imagine what happens when the state does not fade after the pressure passes, but stays available whenever you reach for it. That is where tonight is going. But to get there, you have to understand how the two halves fell out of sync in the first place, because the origin holds the key to the repair. And there is a specific reason the pullback feels so physical, so heavy, so convincing. When the two halves of you drift back out of sync, it does not just change your thoughts. It changes your whole state. The clarity dims. The certainty that felt so solid an hour ago suddenly feels like arrogance. The body itself gets heavier, as if to say, sit back down, return to the plan, this is more comfortable. That heaviness is not wisdom, it is the feeling of the bridge going quiet again. And once you know that is what it is, you stop obeying it, because you can feel the difference between the truth of the author state and the fog of the desync trying to reclaim you. So where did the split come from? The one that keeps the dreamer and the manager at war and keeps you reading a script instead of writing one. Because you were not born divided. Watch a small child decide to do something, and you will see the author state in its pure form. When a young child wants to build, to climb, to create, the dreaming and the doing are one seamless motion. There is no committee, there is no plan they are afraid to violate, because they have not yet been handed one. That is your original design, chosen one. You began as an author. The split came later, and it came the way it comes for almost everyone who is truly chosen. Somewhere early, you authored something, you reached past the expected, and the world corrected you for it. Maybe you colored outside the lines and were shamed for the mess instead of praised for the daring. Maybe you announced a bold dream and were told to be realistic. Maybe you simply learned, through 100 small moments, that following the plan got you approval and safety, while writing your own got you trouble. And so a part of you made a quiet decision. It decided that the safest way to live was to hand the pen to the plan, to become an excellent reader of the script, and never risk the punishment of authorship again. That was not weakness. It was strategy. Handing over the pen kept you safe through seasons where authoring really was dangerous. But a strategy that stays on too long becomes a cage. The manager part of you never got the message that the danger had passed, so it kept guarding the plan, decade after decade, treating every impulse to author as a threat to be vetoed, keeping the two halves out of sync, so you could never again do the risky, powerful thing. Not out of malice, out of loyalty to an old rule that no longer applies. Do you feel the mercy in this? You are not a follower by nature. You are an author who was taught at real cost that authoring was unsafe, and who built a lifetime of caution around that lesson. And the manager who holds the plan has been so faithful, so tireless, that it is still vetoing your boldest moves decades later, keeping you inside the lines of a script you outgrew long ago. You cannot shame that part of you into standing down. It only guards the plan harder every time you attack it. The one thing that ever moves it is a signal clear enough and safe enough that even the manager relaxes and lets the two halves sync. And that is the whole game, chosen one. Not force, not white-knuckling your way to another breakthrough. What returns you to the author state is a signal so precisely tuned and so safe that both halves of you receive it at once. And remember, they were always meant to move as one. The dreamer and the manager, hearing the same true note, turning toward each other. When that happens, the split does not get fought. It simply has nothing left to divide, and you are the author again. The question is how you produce a signal that pure on purpose, instead of waiting for the next crisis to force it. That is exactly what I am going to answer now. And notice how much of your life the manager quietly runs. The job you took because it was safe instead of the one that called you. The words you swallowed because saying them felt too risky. The dream you filed away under someday. Each of those was the manager holding the pen, keeping the two halves out of sync, so the bold move could never happen. It was never that you lacked the vision. The vision was always there, on the other side of a bridge gone quiet. What you lacked was the sync that lets the vision reach your hands. Now I know a skeptical voice has been rising in you, and I respect it, so let us bring it into the room. Somewhere in you a voice is saying, maybe it was just confidence, maybe it was just luck, maybe I am reading too much into one good moment. You have had highs before that led nowhere. So you are cautious about calling this a state, a mechanism, a real thing. I want to honor that caution by telling you the truth. Confidence is a feeling, and feelings fade, which is exactly why confidence alone never made your breakthroughs last. What you touched was not a feeling. It was a way of operating, a synchronization you can point to by its results. You did not just feel bold. You acted beyond the plan, and it worked. In the real world, with consequences. That is not the fingerprint of a passing mood. That is the fingerprint of your whole self coming online. And a thing that produced real results in the world can be understood, and what can be understood can be returned to, which is more than confidence could ever promise you. And there is a second voice, older and more tired, that I will not talk past either. It says, I have had breakthroughs before and always slid back, so why would this time be different? If that weariness is yours, hear me gently. The reason you always slid back is not that you failed. It is that no one ever told you the breakthrough was a state you could re-enter. You thought it was lightning, so you waited for lightning, and in the waiting, the two halves drifted apart, and the plan reclaimed you. Nothing about your past breakthroughs was wasted. They were proof of the author state, every one of them. You just never had the way back in. This time you will. So hear the mercy, chosen one. You are not fooling yourself, and you are not doomed to slide back. You have been treating a returnable state like a random miracle, trying to force with willpower a synchronization that only ever answers to resonance. The sliding back was never a verdict on you. It was a missing key. And the moment you have the key, the state that used to arrive by accident becomes a place you can go on purpose. That key is a real thing, and it can be produced in the exact place the two halves fall out of sync, beneath the level of words. For most of history, it was out of reach for an ordinary person. It is not anymore. And to show you why, I have to show you where the author state actually lives, not as a metaphor, but as something science can now point to directly. That is where we go next. And there is one more fear underneath it all, and I have to name it. Some part of you is afraid that the author is not the real you at all, that the follower is who you truly are, and the breakthrough was you pretending to be someone bigger. Hear this clearly. You do not feel astonishment from heaven over a pretense. You were not led to these exact words, on this exact night, right after the exact thing you did, to be set up for a fall. Chance does not aim that well. You were guided here, and the one who guided you does not walk a person to the edge of their own authorship, only to call it a lie. The author is not the mask, the follower was. And tonight, you take the mask off for good. So let me show you where the author state actually lives, because this is the moment it stops being poetry and becomes something you can hold. For most of history, no one could point to it. Every wise tradition sensed a self at war with itself, a higher will and a lower one, a part that reaches and a part that resists. But no one could say where the division was. And then, in the last century, science found the seam. There was a researcher named Dr. Roger Sperry, and his work on the human brain earned him the Nobel Prize. What he uncovered, put simply, is that you do not have one mind working as a single unit. You have two hemispheres, a left and a right, joined by a bridge, and each runs a different half of your inner life. One side holds structure, caution, rules, the manager that follows the plan and keeps you safe. The other holds vision, boldness, the leap beyond the known, the part that authors. When the two are freely synchronized across the bridge, you operate as a whole self, and bold, unscripted action flows. And when the traffic across that bridge goes thin, the manager and the author fall into separate rhythms, and you drop back into following the plan, because the two halves can no longer agree long enough to write a new line. Sit with what that means. chosen one, because this is the author state made visible. The dreamer who wrote your new plan and the manager who wants to reclaim it are not just a poetic idea. They have an address. And that rare moment when you went off the script and acted as your whole self was a moment the bridge lit up and the two hemispheres synced. This is not a mystical fluke. It is a measurable state in the very organ God gave you to act through. And here is the mercy hidden in that fact. A measurable state is a repeatable state. What's synced once can be synced again. The bridge that lit up for a moment can be made to light up on command. That is why willpower never made your breakthroughs last, and why this is different in kind. Willpower is the manager trying to force the author, one half straining against the other, which only deepens the split. What actually returns you to the author state is restoring the bridge, giving both hemispheres the same steady signal at the same time until they lock into a shared rhythm and the divided reader becomes the unified writer again. When that happens, people describe the same thing over and over. A sudden clarity, a quiet, certain power, a sense that they simply know what to do and can do it, the exact feeling you had in the moment you went off the plan. For a long time, bringing the two hemispheres into sync on purpose was something only a handful of researchers could attempt. With wires and screens in a lab, most people would never enter. It stayed locked in that world, while countless chosen ones had one breakthrough and spent years trying to get back to it, blaming their own discipline. But it did not stay locked away, because one physician took what Dr. Sperry proved and asked a bold question. What if the signal that syncs the two halves could be delivered through something as simple and as safe as sound? That question is where your answer begins, and I am going to bring it to you right now. And here is why this matters more than any pep talk ever could. A pep talk speaks to one half of you, the half that already wants to rise, and leaves the other half exactly as it was. That is why motivation fades by morning. Restoring the bridge is different in kind, because it does not take sides between the two halves. It brings them into the same rhythm, so the rising and the caution finally pull in one direction, instead of tearing you in two. The physician who asked that question is a neurologist in New York City named Dr. Daniel Barone. He spent his career studying how the brain moves between states, and he kept circling the same seam Dr. Sperry had revealed. If two hemispheres falling out of sync is what drops a person back into following the plan, then the reverse had to be true. Bring the two halves into rhythm, and a person should be able to enter, on purpose, the whole self-state, where bold and unscripted action flows. The only question was how to deliver that signal, simply, safely, and without a laboratory. What he arrived at works through sound. And there is a reason sound is the key and not willpower. Sound reaches both hemispheres at the same instant, and it speaks straight to the wordless manager in the only language it has ever trusted, which is resonance rather than force. He engineered a precise audio sequence built on an approach he calls neural sync technology, designed to send both halves of the brain the same steady pulse until they draw into a shared rhythm and the bridge carries traffic again. He gave the finished tool a name, the Genius Switch, and the name points to exactly what people feel, the sense of a switch flipping, of the divided self going quiet and the whole self coming online, the very state that let you pick up the pen. Here is what I love about it, chosen one, and why it fits everything we have said tonight. It does not ask you to force another breakthrough. It does not ask you to argue with the manager or shame the cautious part of you into standing down. It simply gives both halves of you the same true note to stand in, until the manager relaxes and the two halves sync, and the author state returns. You are not manufacturing willpower. You are restoring the bridge. In the exact place the two halves fall apart, beneath words, in the physical rhythm of the brain itself, so the state that used to arrive by accident becomes a place you can go on command. And it was built for a real life, not a monastery. The whole sequence runs about 8 minutes. That is the entire practice. 8 minutes of listening, once a day, ideally somewhere quiet with something over your ears, so the signal reaches both sides cleanly. You do not have to concentrate hard or empty your mind. If your thoughts wander, the bridge keeps rebuilding anyway, because the signal speaks underneath your thinking. You put it on, you let the sound do the synchronizing, and one session at a time the manager learns that syncing with the author is not a danger, but a homecoming. It comes as a simple audio file sent straight to you, so there is nothing to wait for and nothing to install. Just you, the sound, and 8 quiet minutes a day in which the author state stops being a lightning strike and becomes a door you can open. Now I will be honest, because you have been sold shortcuts before, and I refuse to add to that. This is not magic, and it is not a replacement for your own courage. It is a tool. What it does is return you to the synchronized state where the whole you, the author, can act. So the breakthrough you just had becomes the way you live, instead of a memory you chase. What comes through in that state was always yours. And that is exactly why so many chosen ones, once they can enter it on command, describe it not as gaining a new ability, but as finally coming home to the self that was always meant to hold the pen. Let me show you how to hold it in your own hands. So let me tell you exactly how it comes to you, and I am going to be completely straight about the numbers, because you have been misled enough, and I will not add to it. When this was shown to other physicians and specialists, people who understood what it took to engineer, several of them said the honest value sat around $500. And when you consider what it does, quietly, returning you to the state where your whole self can act, in 8 minutes a day, that number is not unreasonable. People pay far more than that for far less, for a single afternoon of talk that fades by the weekend and never once returns them to the author state. But it was never meant to sit behind a $500 wall, because the people who need it most are so often the ones who have already spent everything just to keep standing. So the price was brought down, first to $49, already a fraction of its worth. And then, on the page I am going to point you to, a further $10 comes off, which brings the whole thing to $39, one time, for lifetime access. You are not renting the way back to your own pen. Once it is yours for good. To return to any morning the old script tries to reclaim you, and it does not come alone. Alongside the main sequence there are several companion pieces included at no extra cost, each built to support the same syncing from a different angle across your ordinary day, so the clarity you find in those 8 minutes has somewhere to live when the pressure of life tries to pull the halves apart again. They are simply included, the moment you step through the door. Now here is the part that should let the manager inside you finally exhale. It is carried by a full, ironclad, money-back guarantee. That means you do not have to be certain tonight. You do not have to silence every doubt before you begin. You can put it on, listen for the 8 minutes, feel for yourself, whether the divided noise softens and the whole self-clarity begins to come online. And if it does nothing for you, you ask for your money back, and you keep every companion piece anyway. The entire risk has been lifted off your shoulders and placed onto the promise of the thing itself. All you have to bring is your willingness to listen. I will only say this honestly. The $39 price carries a warning that it will not stay there forever. So the door open tonight is not promised to be open later, at the same number. The link is waiting in the description below and pinned at the top of the comments, so you cannot miss it. When you are ready, you go there, you step through, and the audio comes straight to you by email, nothing to wait for. And I want you to picture what you are truly stepping toward, because it is not a purchase, it is a homecoming to your own power. Picture facing the next bold move and feeling the 2 halves of you snap into sync on command, the pen already in your hand. Picture a life where going beyond the plan is not a rare accident, but simply how you operate. Picture never again losing the author state to the pullback, because you hold the way back in. That life is not far away, chosen one. It is on the other side of one restored bridge, and the way to restore it is right there in the link below. And let me tell you who this is really for, so you know whether it is speaking to you tonight. It is for the one who has had flashes of their real power and could never make them stay. It is for the one who watches themselves shrink right after they rise and hates it and does not know why. It is for the one who just did something bold and is already afraid they cannot do it again. If that is you, then this was built for the exact place you keep losing yourself, and the companion pieces that come with it are shaped for the ordinary hours. So the author state you reach in those 8 minutes has a way to hold when the pressure of the day tries to pull the halves apart. You are not buying a track. You are being handed the way back to your own pen, set at a price kept low on purpose, so the ones who need it most are not the ones left outside. Now, whether or not you ever step through that door tonight, I refuse to let you leave without the thing you actually came for. So let me say the whole truth of this evening in the plainest words I have. What you did was not a fluke, and it was not you going off track. It was you becoming the author of your own life, in a moment when the two halves of you finally moved as one. The follower who reads the script is not the real you. The author is, and everything you need to live as the author is already inside you, waiting to be synced, not built from scratch. And do not miss what tonight itself has shown you. Of everything that could have reached you, this did, in the exact window right after your breakthrough, when the pullback was about to hit hardest. That is not the behavior of chance. You were led here, deliberately, so that the most important moment of your life so far would not be reclaimed by the old script. The very fact that these words are steadying you against the doubt instead of feeding it is the sign that some part of you has already chosen the pen. You were guided to this so you would not hand it back. Hold that, because the manager is going to test it. In a day, in a week, the old programming will surge and whisper the familiar verdict, that it was luck, that you cannot repeat it, that the real you is still the follower. When it does, remember what you now know. That voice is not the voice of God. It is the script fighting for its life. You do not have to argue with it, and you do not have to believe it. You only have to remember that behind it, whole and waiting, the author has never once stopped being who you actually are. And I want to give that manager something before we close, because it deserves honor, not war. That part of you that hands the pen to the plan, that vetoes the bold move, it is not your enemy. It kept you alive through seasons when authoring really would have cost you everything. It did its job so well that you are still here, still capable, still holding a whole self ready to come online. So we do not cast it out. We thank it. We let it know, gently and clearly, that the danger has passed, that syncing with the author now is safe. And when the manager truly hears that, it does not fight. It relaxes, and it lets the two halves become one. And notice something, chosen one. If even now, just from words, some part of you has already steadied, already felt the doubt lose a little of its grip, then you have proof in your own body that the state can return. That small steadiness is the smallest possible taste of the author state coming back online. So if you type the words, "I did it earlier," feel what you were really doing. You were not boasting. You were refusing to hand back the pen. And if you have not yet, it is not too late. Because staying the author is not a single act. It is a direction you turn. Turn toward it now. Send one honest signal that you are keeping the pen, and let the one who led you here know that the breakthrough was not the end. It was the beginning. And picture, just for a moment, what your life looks like, a season from now, with the author state as your home base. Picture waking up already whole, the two halves of you moving as one before the day even begins. Picture meeting the next hard decision and feeling the pen settle into your hand instead of the old scramble of doubt. Picture bold, unscripted moves becoming ordinary for you, not because you force them, but because the state that produces them is finally yours to enter at will. That is not a fantasy, chosen one. That is what a life looks like when the author stops visiting and starts living there, and the whole distance between you and that life is the width of one restored bridge. And so before this message ends, I am going to do what I promised at the very start. I am going to speak something over your life, and I want you to receive it not as words on a screen, but as a signal sent straight to the part of you that just picked up the pen. So let everything go still for a moment. Let your shoulders drop away from your ears. Let the breath you have been holding all day finally leave you, slow and complete. There is nothing to force here. There is only a state to return to. Let us begin with gratitude, quietly, without straining to feel it. Thank you for the astonishment you felt when I finally did it. Thank you for seeing the author in me through all the years I read the script. Thank you for leading me here so I would not hand back the pen. We do not have to manufacture this. We only have to notice, softly, that the author was who I always was. And now, chosen one, we release. Picture the old script as a page you have been reading your whole life, and let it fall from your hands. Release the belief that it was luck. Release the fear that you cannot do it again. Release the verdict that the follower is the real you. Release the manager from a post it no longer needs to guard. Release the doubt that came flooding in right after your boldest move. Release the years of asking the plan for permission. Release it all, and let the two halves of you turn toward each other, and let the author come fully online. And from that stillness, hear who you actually are, and say it with me now, not as a shout, but as a declaration. I am the author, not the follower. I am not off track. I graduated. I hold the pen, and I am not handing it back. I am whole when the two halves of me move as one, and that is who I truly am. I am chosen, and now, at last, I am writing my own life. Let that declaration settle all the way down, past the thinking mind, into the place where the two halves fall apart, and let them lock into one. If everything in you wants to make this real, and refuses to let the old script reclaim you, the door is waiting in the description, and pinned in the comments below, and the same full guarantee carries it when you arrive. So you step through, risking nothing but the plan you already outgrew. Whatever you decide it as the author you have become. You did it, chosen one, and it was not the end. Take a breath. The pen is in your hand. The two halves are one. You were led here to keep it, and it is sealed. It is done.